it might be 2 hours at night. But if you do that, it's breaking it down. What is a measurable step that I can take? Could I do 1 hour a day towards my dream? Could I do 2 hours a day? Because even if you're working and being responsible and paying the bills, there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to as well start taking chances and risks in ways like measured risks that aren't going to like us. This is not going to sink the bank account. This is not going to sink the family.
Right. Wise
calculated risk.
Right. Talking about creating and producing, tell me about, so on this podcast, we talk about learning from our mistakes.
Ooh.
And that's what those are some of the best lessons that we learn.
Yes.
You were talking to me the other day about perfection and pursuing fame. I don't know if you put it that, but you talked about like watching the number of Spotify listeners happening and watching the metrics and being like consumed. I don't think you said the word consumed, but with this growth and this thing, and you had some hit songs happen. You had some of your songs on Dude Perfect videos. That was a big thing. And I think you said something like, I think God kept me from getting like big, and it was very helpful and beneficial, and I'm glad it happened. Talk through that whole scenario and perfection and fame and numbers and that.
Yes. Well, as far as like blowing up, I mean, I was having this conversation with Andrew, who has been part of We Are Leo on and off, and is my dear friend and still works with me. But, I think around 2014, 2015, it felt like we should have blown up. Like everything was in place for it to feel like we should have really blown up. And that was before I had gone on my recovery journey. And a lot of us in the band, I think it's fair to say that we all had stuff to work through. And I think it was God's grace.
Like you're just regular people that you've got stuff to work through.
Right.
Wow.
And I feel like, adding, particular for my issues, I'll say that, is adding money and fame to someone who has a lot of issues and hasn't worked through those. I think it would have destroyed me and my relationships with my brother and Andrew. And so I think it was God's grace not to allow money and fame to reach an excessive point. I mean, I'm grateful for the impact that we made, and we have also made some money. So I'm grateful for again the things that we have overcome and the impact that we've made. But I'm also glad that it didn't get out of control. Arenas, tour buses, because it would have gone really wrong, and I don't think I would have been able to get back from that. Like the bigger the tower is when it crashes, it's so I feel like it was God's grace. It's that cheesy country song, like thankful for unanswered prayers. But very much the truth in that situation.
All right, so you have sort of pivoted your career a little bit. You just released an online course about songwriting. You're doing some of your own producing, which for people who aren't music world thing, that is a whole different animal than writing music and recording music. It is the kind of back end and producing and all this kind of stuff. But you wanted to do that and learn that skill because why? Why are you trying to do new things and video production with your course, and why did you want to do new things? And
I was at my friend Bobby's wedding, and so I just had a weekend to think, and that's always a great thing, right? Getting away from things, just thinking, having time in the quiet. And I had a realization that we had done Kickstarters in the past. Our first label, or our first record, the label paid for everything. They just fronted the whole bill. So God bless those guys. Love you. Thank you. Appreciate you. But then they decided not to be a label anymore. So we got signed, but we had to do Kickstarters for our next two. And I had this realization that it wasn't going to be doable to ask for that much funding. Like, again, coming back to like trade-offs, like I was like asking for funding is now becoming my full-time job so that I can take the funds I raise and pay someone else to make my music, in essence. I mean, that's an overstatement because I was still writing it, but really the nitty gritty of producing and making everything sound good, I was hiring people from Nashville and collaborating with them. So, but anyway, I realized it wasn't going to be sustainable to do a Kickstarter every other year for the rest of my life. And quite frankly, it's not fair to keep asking the fans to do that so I realized that, look, I needed to learn how to produce. And that scared me because I knew that 3 to 5 years of learning how to produce and putting stuff out, that from the outside, it might look like we were getting worse. Like as I'm putting stuff out that I produced versus a top producer from Nashville.
Right.
And people, oh, why are you changing your sound or why are you changing your style? That was scary for me to put myself out like that because I didn't want to be criticized and I didn't want people to think that things were falling apart and I didn't want to lose fans. But I just had to face that because I'm like, look, in 3 to 5 years when you don't have to drop $25,000 on a record and you can just make it, once you start getting good at that, you're going to be unstoppable. If you can just get through the next 3 to 5 years of learning how to do this.
So sustainability, that was a word that you used.
Absolutely.
For the long term.
Yeah. And my thought was, look, I can make the music that I make. So people that are actually fans, and I mean, this is something that Rick Rubin said, when an artist changes their genre, they're so scared because fans might not follow them. But he's like, have you ever thought that potentially it was just your enthusiasm or your voice or the message that you carry that got people into your music at the same time? And if it's not, do you really want, it's not that you wouldn't want them to come along for the ride, but if you're moving on with your life and doing something new and someone doesn't want to join you, I think you have to accept that, okay, that doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. It just means that I can't be the person I was 10 years ago for the next 50 years.
Right. Like you have to grow and change and develop.
But it's hard for me to accept, like, okay, some people might get off the bandwagon, and then if enough people get on the bandwagon, well, this whole thing just, crash and burn, and then does that mean I'm a bad person? Like, you have to face down those lies, those demons, those voices in your head, and just be courageous and try things, and I'm so glad I did. I mean, I think we are, then I think to myself, oh, why are we hitting a little bit of a lull? And I'm like, no, I knew that this was going to happen, but now I'm actually set up to make a record without going to Nashville and spending $25,000, $35,000, $40,000,
Cool. So now on the other side of that, what's going through your head? You've now done a video course, a songwriting course online. That was another new kind of project that I think you kind of challenged yourself to do.
Yes.
Look, I appreciate, Dave, this is great that you are not just like, I knew you as Dave the keyboard player 20 years ago.
Right.
You have not settled into that comfort and just done what is comfortable. You've pushed yourself.
Right.
Like, I love it. Like, it's great. So, like, because lots of guys don't do that, Dave. Like, lots of guys just work their jobs and have these ideas and dreams and don't take a step in that direction.
Right.
If you're watching or listening to this, like, take a step towards something that is in your heart.
Right.
God's given us these dreams and skills, and sometimes the dreams and the skills don't match, so you've got to go out and develop the skills.
Right.
Which is so awesome, Dave, that you've done this kind of stuff.
Thanks.
Encouraging. Be courageous and try new things. I just think it's inspiring, and I love it. I just love it.
Yes. Well, and it's the crazy thing is how the intersection of work and addiction actually combine. And this is something that Brene Brown talks about, because, talking about purity or whatever kind of addiction you might face, whether that's substance abuse or pornography, those are the kind of the usual ones. But tying that into work, I mean, Brene Brown says, look, according to our culture stereotypes, if men want to play it super safe, Stop feeling, start earning. And so, try something new that might not work, that might not pay off financially. That's not playing it safe. But she goes on to say that she said humans should come with a warning label. If you don't be authentic to yourself, like, like the ones on the cigarette packages, like if you trade in your authenticity for playing it safe, watch out for addiction, depression, like loneliness, and a feeling like of just numbness in life. And so it's like, if you play it super safe with your job, and even though you might have these dreams or these visions like what you're talking about, and you ignore that, that leads straight to addiction. And so you're like, oh, I can't kick this addiction. Well, maybe it potentially is because you're not moving in the correct direction that God has for you. And it's not about quitting your job on some faith that like, no, it's about, I mean, even for me in this season, I'm looking after my son. It might be 2 hours at night. But if you do that, it's breaking it down. What is a measurable step that I can take? Could I do 1 hour a day towards my dream? Could I do 2 hours a day? Because even if you're working and being responsible and paying the bills, there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to as well start taking chances and risks in ways like measured risks that aren't going to like us. This is not going to sink the bank account. This is not going to sink the family.
Right. Wise
calculated risk.
Right.
Oh, okay, this is not going to put us under. I can take an hour a day, 2 hours a day of my free time and invest that into something for the future.
And I'm not even sure that is much of a risk, because looking at my own time, if I had my recording on my phone, but how much time did I scroll on social media in the last week? Right? No, wrong. Lots. And it's like, so I can cut out some of that and get an hour a day or 30 minutes a day or something, like redeeming the time that we have, and not, no offense if you're a fantasy football guy or following sports and stuff, because I like sports too, but men get invested in these teams that are not, we are going to win the cup this year. Well, it's not really a we. And how much time are you putting into that? Could you take an hour a day to write your book, to write your songs, to create your invention on your 3D printer or your software?
Particularly if you're stuck and you're frustrated. Do you know what I mean? Like if hockey or football or basketball is something, like if you're going for it in your life and you're not dealing with addiction and your marriage is good and your finances are good and you're going for it, and watching sports is a way to get inspired and recharged, that's awesome.
Go nuts.
And I mean, sports recharges me. And but if there's no excitement in your life because you're not being brave and not going for your goals, then you have to find your excitement from sports or drink or porn or fill in the blank. And that's where it becomes bad. I'm not going for anything. I'm not using my faith. I'm not flexing my courage muscle at all. So then I have to find that like excitement within sports. That to me is where it can go wrong with sports.
Right. Hey, thanks for joining us today. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, like it, share, review, do all the things you're supposed to do. We really appreciate it. We want to keep making great content and learning from our mistakes, getting wisdom. Thanks so much. See you next time.